Excel demo with Rich Kerr. In this scenario, I've got a list of orders over here in a table that I've called orders, right? So I've formatted this data set as a table and named it orders. And I'd like to be able to find out something about maybe the last 5 orders, like maybe the average sales or the total sales, or maybe what was the largest sale from the last 5 orders. I'd also like to be able to change that number. Maybe I'm interested in the last 3 orders or the last 10 orders. So I need to set up a formula that will extract the total sales figure or figures for the last 10 or 3 or 2, however many orders. Let's get started. Now let's set this to, say, 3 to start with. So first, we're going to use a function called chooseCols. The chooseCols or chooseColumns function is really what that stands for. It allows you to select a certain column or columns from an existing array of data. So if I have a range called orders, which I do, comma, then I can indicate as many columns as I want to be extracted from that array. I'm only interested in the last column. So for example, if I wanted the first column, I would put a 1 here, okay? And that would give me the leftmost column, and that's the order numbers. So that's for the first column. It's basically column number 1. But if I want the last column, I put a -1. So then it'll reference the data coming from the right side. So the last 1 column, or the last column, that's the total sales column. And that's actually what I wanted. So I wanted to see those figures from the last column. So that's pretty good. It is grabbing that data from over there. Okay, so we're only part of the way there because I really only want the last 3 entries in this list. Okay, so how do I go about getting just the last 3? Well, another way of saying that you want the last 3 is you want to drop all but the last 3 columns. Let me show you, or last 3 rows I should say. So let me show you separately how that works, and then we'll incorporate it into one formula. There's a function called drop. So if I choose equals drop, and I reference that orders array, and I say how many rows do I want to drop? Well, if I have 31 rows of data in my table and I want to leave only 3, then I would drop 31 minus 3, or I would drop 28 entries. So how do we calculate that? First, I need to know how many rows there are in the table, and then subtract the number 3. That's how many I need to drop. So to figure out how many rows there are in the table, there's actually a function called rows, and I refer to the table. It's called orders, and then minus 3. So again, if there's 31 rows in the table, that's not counting the header. So rows of orders would be 31. Minus 3 is 28. So in essence saying you want to drop 28 rows. And so you can see that left me with the last 3 rows. You see this here? It actually brought over all from the last 3 rows. If we look over here, that is in fact the last 3 rows. Okay? So we can see it brought over everything. If I had said I want the last 5 orders, then what we would have done in here is set minus 5. And then you see we get the last 5. Now what you could do instead of typing in the number 5 is just refer to that cell H1. That's where I've got my number typed in. So then whatever number you put in H1, if I want the last 10 orders, boom, we see 10 orders. And that matches from 121 to 130. That's the last 10 orders. And let's go with a smaller number like 5. So now we know how to drop all but the last 5 or last 10, whatever your number is. but I really only want to drop the last. I want to drop all but the last 5 orders, not from the orders table, but just from the array of data that has the sales figures. So we're going to change this up just a little bit. So we're going to say drop, but not from the array called orders, but from the array that's pulling back just the sales figures, right? So we want to combine these two things. So I'm actually just going to get rid of it over here. We're going to come to the array that we already wrote here, because we already have this array that's pulling over the total sales. So we're going to say drop, open paren. This is the array from which we're going to drop some rows, comma. How many rows are we going to drop? Well, it's whatever the number of rows there are in the orders table minus the value in H1. Okay, so I'm taking that list of sales figures and I'm going to drop all but the last 5 or last 3. And there you have it. So now we see these 5 entries, they match the last 5 over here. Okay, and so now we have those values. And if we want to format them, we certainly could. You can turn on your accounting style. And what you might do is, if you're going to change that number up there, you might format a few more cells, right, so that they already have that accounting style format. So if I want the last 8 order values, there we go. If I want the last 3, there we go. So we can see that that works. Now it's super easy to calculate the average, the total, and the largest. So you could do this a few ways. For average, we say equals average, and I'm going to refer to cell G6 because that's where we start off our list of the sales figures from those orders that we're referencing. Now, I'm going to show you something a little special here, right? Because I'm saying last 3 orders, so you could say G6 through G9, but then if you have 7 orders or 10 orders, it's going to be a different set of addresses. Because this formula spills down to the rows below based on the number of orders that I've specified, we're going to use the pound sign here. So when you say average G6 pound sign, it knows to highlight all the way down to the last value in that array. So it knows that in this case you're going down to G9. Well, if I change this to say 10, then that pound sign is sending the formula all the way down all 10 of those entries. So this pound sign causes your formula to extend down to the spilled rows. And that's how you do that. So now for the total, we would say equals sum open paren G6 pound sign, and you see how the highlighting goes all the way down when you do that. And now I have the sum for that range, and then the largest we would say equals max, and again G6 pound sign, and it highlights all that data. So I know the largest entry out of the last 10 was 1700. The total of the last 10 was 11,700, and the average was 1,170. And you could check that too, right? So you could select the last 10 entries. So if I select the last 10 entries, we can look in our auto calculate area and see that the average is 1170, the count is 10, the max is 1700, etc. Sum is 11,700. So there you go. And it's dynamic. You can simply change this, and it'll, depending on the size of your data set, maybe you want the average of the last 200 sales or last 1,000 sales, depending on what your data set looks like. So there you go. Using the drop and choose calls functions, we can dynamically pull out the last X number of values from this total sales column. I hope you found it useful.